The warm smell of roasted turkey, cinnamon stuffing, and sweet potato casserole filled my father's dining room air. It was Thanksgiving, the one holiday every single family member dragged themselves to no matter what bad blood lingered between us. I'd brought my 10-year-old son Jax, hoping for a peaceful, ordinary holiday meal. I'd foolishly prayed this year would pass without my father's cruel, attention-grabbing games. I was wrong. All the usual faces sat around the long wooden table. My father sat at the head of the table, proud and domineering as always. My brother Mark and his teenage son, my nephew Cole, were seated across from us. A couple of distant aunts and uncles rounded out the group. Plates were piled high, glasses filled, and everyone was just about ready to dig into the feast when my father raised his hand, quieting every conversation around the table. "Before we eat," he announced, his voice loud enough to cut through the room, "I want Jax to stand up for us." My stomach immediately twisted tight. I glanced over at my boy. Jax froze in his chair, his small shoulders tensing. He was shy by nature, hated being put on the spot in front of grown-ups and older kids. I had a bad feeling about where this was going, but before I could interject, my father gestured sharply toward Jax. "On your feet, boy. You are 10 years old now. You are old enough to earn your place at this Thanksgiving table. Go ahead. List 3 reasons you are worth feeding this year." A low, awkward hush fell over the table. Some relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but nobody spoke up to stop him. My nephew Cole leaned back in his chair, a wide, mocking grin spreading across his face, and he started laughing. Quiet snickering escaped him as he watched Jax squirm. My heart shattered right there in my chest. This was not harmless family fun. This was public humiliation, forcing a child to justify why he deserved food on a holiday. Jax's cheeks flushed bright red. His hands trembled in his lap. Slowly, he pushed his chair back and stood on shaky legs. His eyes glistened, fighting back tears. He took a shaky breath and opened his mouth, ready to start listing his reasons. I could not let it happen. I would not watch my son tear himself apart trying to prove he deserved a plate of Thanksgiving dinner. I shot up from my chair fast, cutting him off before he could get his very first sentence fully out. "Sit down, son." My voice was steady, firm, no yelling, but every person at that table heard me clearly. Jax blinked in surprise, then quickly dropped back down into his seat, relief flooding his young face. I turned my full attention toward my father. Every eye locked onto me. I kept my tone level, cold and unmistakable. No hysterics, just hard facts everyone in this room knew perfectly well. That mortgage payment I have been covering for this house since March? I notified the bank this month will be the final one. Complete silence crashed over the dining room. The faint clink of silverware stopped entirely. My father's smug, self-satisfied expression vanished in an instant. His jaw dropped. He had been relying on my monthly mortgage contributions for months. He had grown completely comfortable living in this home on my dime while playing these cruel little power games at family gatherings. I did not stay to argue. I reached down, grabbed our winter coats draped over the back of our chairs. I placed Jax's jacket over his shoulders. "Come on, Jax, we are leaving. No goodbyes, no further explanations." I took my son's hand, and we walked straight out of my father's house, leaving the stunned Thanksgiving dinner party sitting behind us. The front door clicked shut behind us. The cool autumn night air hit our faces. I buckled Jax safely into the passenger seat of my car, then pulled out of the driveway without glancing back in the rearview mirror. Jax stayed quiet for most of the drive. After several minutes, he softly spoke. "Mom, did I do something wrong back there?" My chest ached. I reached over and squeezed his hand. "You did absolutely nothing wrong. You never have to earn a meal or earn a spot with us. You do not owe anyone a list of reasons you deserve to exist." We stopped and picked up takeout fried chicken and pie on the way home. We ate our quiet little Thanksgiving feast on our own living room couch, watching a silly cartoon movie. It was far from the big fancy holiday everyone else was enjoying, but it was safe. There was no shame, no demands, no forced performances. Once Jax fell asleep in his bed later that night, my phone began to blow up. One call came through, then another. They kept stacking. By the time morning rolled around, my call log showed 71 missed calls. Texts flooded my message inbox nonstop. My father, my brother Mark, multiple aunts and uncles, even several unknown numbers. They were furious, panicked, desperate. The man who thought nothing of humiliating my 10-year-old son at the dinner table was now terrified to lose the financial safety net I had provided him. The fallout was only just beginning. When I woke up Friday morning, my phone screen was lit up with notification after notification. 71 missed calls sat at the top of the call history, exactly as I had seen late the night before. Dozens upon dozens of text messages piled underneath them, flooding my message threads from my father, my brother Mark, and multiple extended relatives. I kept my phone on silent and left it face down on the kitchen counter while I made breakfast for Jax. He seemed calmer today, but I could still see faint traces of that Thanksgiving table humiliation lingering behind his eyes. I had already submitted the formal notice to the bank days before the holiday. There was no quick toggle switch to undo the mortgage termination. The final payment would process as scheduled, and after that, my father would be fully responsible for every single dollar owed on his house. There was no going back. My father's texts were the most volatile. He alternated between screaming rage and manufactured hurt. He accused me of overreacting to a harmless little Thanksgiving game. He insisted I had ruined the whole family holiday over nothing more than my hurt feelings. He wrote long paragraphs about everything he had done for me when I was growing up, dragging up decades-old memories as supposed proof that I owed him endless loyalty and financial support. Mark's messages were equally frustrating. He downplayed what had happened at the dinner table. He said Dad was just teasing Jax, that Cole's laughter was nothing more than silly teenage boy nonsense. Mark told me I was being dramatic, that pulling the mortgage payment was a nuclear-level response to a minor family disagreement. He kept repeating that I was going to leave our father homeless out of petty anger. Some of my aunts and uncles joined in as well. They sent pleading messages, urging me to reconsider. Many of them had sat right there at that dinner table. They had watched my father force my 10-year-old son to stand and justify his right to eat Thanksgiving food. Yet most of them chose to frame my reaction as far worse than the original humiliation. A couple of them even claimed Jax would suffer lasting emotional damage because I had caused such a huge family fight. I set my phone aside for several hours. I focused entirely on Jax. We built block towers, baked chocolate chip cookies, and watched lighthearted cartoons. I did my best to give him a peaceful, stress-free day, away from all the family chaos, but I knew I could not ignore the messages forever. Once Jax settled in for his afternoon video game time, I sat down at the kitchen table and read through every thread. One text stopped me cold. It was from my nephew Cole. He sent it directly to my private number. He did not apologize for laughing at Jax. Instead, he mocked my reaction. He said Jax should have just played along with Grandpa's little game, and none of this mess would have ever happened. According to him, I was throwing everyone's life upside down just because my kid got his feelings hurt. That message solidified my resolve. None of them grasped how harmful that moment at the dinner table really had been. They all viewed a child's public shame as trivial, something you brush off for the sake of family harmony. I took screenshots of the worst messages. I saved my original confirmation email from the bank, documenting that my final mortgage payment was already locked in. I did not want to get trapped in a he-said-she-said argument later on. I composed one single mass reply for every relative blowing up my phone. I kept it calm, factual, no yelling or dramatic language. I described exactly what had unfolded at the Thanksgiving table. My father ordering 10-year-old Jax to stand and list 3 reasons he was worth feeding, Cole laughing while my son trembled. I explained I had covered the mortgage since March out of care, but I could no longer financially support a household that treated my child like that. I told them the bank paperwork was final, and there was no way for me to reverse it. I hit send. The response was immediate. My father called again and again and again. Mark fired off angry paragraphs. Several relatives replied saying I was twisting the story to make Dad look evil. They refused to accept that the situation was as cruel as I described. They kept circling back to the same talking point. Even if Dad misbehaved, I had no right to risk his home. I knew this was only round 1. They would not stop at texts and calls. It would not be long before somebody showed up at my front door or tried to corner me through mutual acquaintances. The guilt-tripping pressure campaign was fully underway, and they were desperate to get me to cave. By the 3rd day after Thanksgiving, the family's narrative had fully solidified among relatives. They were not telling people that Dad humiliated my 10-year-old son. They were telling everyone I was a vengeful, ungrateful child who destroyed my father's security over a tiny family joke. Every uncomfortable detail from that dinner table got erased in their retelling. I continued keeping my phone on silent. Jax had returned to school, and I refused to let family drama disrupt his routine. Still, I could tell the incident lingered in his mind. He was quieter than usual, and one night before bed, he asked me if Grandpa hated him. My heart cracked open. I pulled him close and told him firmly that no one got to make him earn kindness, meals, or respect. While I was rebuilding my son's confidence, my family was busy rallying against me. My brother Mark posted a lengthy Facebook status painting me as reckless and cruel. He claimed Dad was heartbroken, that I was abandoning our family, and that I was risking our father's lifelong home over hurt feelings. He did not mention the public shaming, did not mention Cole's laughter, did not mention how I had carried the mortgage alone for 8 months straight. A flood of distant cousins and old family friends commented sympathy, agreeing that I was overreacting. Only 2 distant cousins messaged me privately, saying they'd always thought Dad's treatment of kids was harsh and that I was right to protect my son. That afternoon, my father finally got through to me on a call. I answered once and for all to hear him out. He did not start with an apology. He started with demands. You reverse that mortgage cancellation immediately. "You owe me this house. I raised you. Everything you have is because of me." I stayed calm and unshaken. "I paid your mortgage from March until November. I covered every month faithfully without complaint. I did it out of love and respect. But you forced my 10-year-old son to stand in front of the entire family and justify his right to eat. You let his cousin laugh while he trembled. That's not love. That's cruelty," Dad scoffed bitterly. "It was discipline. Kids these days are soft. He needs to learn gratitude." "Gratitude is earned by kindness," I replied, "not by public humiliation. Gratitude does not require a child to list reasons he deserves food on a holiday table." He refused to see it. He kept circling back to obligation, to his parental rights, to how I was destroying his life. He told me I would regret abandoning him in his older years. He said I would be the shameful story the family told forever. I ended the call shortly after. I knew reasoning with him was useless. He saw children as lifelong investments, not people. To him, my finances were his safety net, and my son's dignity was trivial training for being tough. Mark texted me afterward with a new angle. He tried to bargain. He said Dad would apologize lightly if I reinstated the mortgage. He said Cole would stop mocking Jax. He promised better behavior in the future. I saw straight through the empty promises. There was no genuine remorse, only panic about losing free financial support. They were not offering change. They were offering temporary politeness until the money flowed again. I declined the bargain outright. I knew the mortgage deadline was approaching fast. The final payment would clear, and after that, Dad would have zero financial help from me. The closer the date came, the more desperate and aggressive my family would become. Their mask of hurt victimhood was already beginning to slip, revealing pure financial panic underneath. As the week dragged on, the family's tactics shifted from guilt-tripping to desperate bargaining. Mark became the main messenger, texting me multiple times a day with new offers, each one more desperate than the last. First, he promised Dad would never single Jax out again at family events. Then he promised Cole would apologize personally. Then he said they would host a special family dinner, just to make Jax feel loved and respected. Every single offer centered on fixing the surface problem, while completely ignoring the core issue, their belief that my child's dignity was negotiable, and my money was not. I read every message but did not cave. I knew their apologies would be performative, their promises temporary. One evening, Cole texted me directly again. This time his tone was less mocking and more anxious. He admitted his grandpa had been on his case nonstop since Thanksgiving. He said Dad was furious that the house was now in jeopardy, and he was taking all his frustration out on everyone in the household. "I didn't mean to make Jax feel bad," he typed. "I was just laughing 'cause it was awkward. I didn't know you'd stop paying the house bills over it." It was the closest he would ever get to an apology, but it was still self-centered. He was not sorry for hurting Jax. He was sorry his casual cruelty had consequences for the adults. I replied simply, "You laughed while a kid was publicly shamed. That's not awkwardness. That's cruelty. Until your family understands that, no promises will fix this." Cole never texted back. The next day, my father sent me a photo of the house's mortgage statement, showing the upcoming due date. He highlighted the late fee charges and typed a long message begging mercy. He said he could not afford the full payment alone, that his retirement income was too small, that he would lose the house entirely without my help. He conveniently left out that he had refused to budget, refused to save, refused to downsize, because he had grown fully dependent on my monthly payments. For 8 months, he had lived comfortably off my income while feeling entitled to judge, discipline, and humiliate my child. I saved the photo and all messages as evidence. I was not being cruel. I was ending an exploitative cycle they had grown addicted to. Mark called me in tears that night. He claimed Dad was stressed to the point of sickness, that he could not sleep, that he was terrified of losing the home he'd lived in for decades. He begged me to have sympathy, to remember all the good childhood memories, to not destroy our family legacy. I told him the truth plainly. I have sympathy for people who treat others with kindness. I have no sympathy for adults who bully children and then demand financial loyalty. Mark exploded. He accused me of being cold, unforgiving, heartless. He said I was breaking the family apart for no reason. I ended the call and blocked his number temporarily to reset my peace. That night, Jax came into my room, crawling into my bed for comfort. He told me kids at school had noticed he was quiet. He admitted he kept replaying the moment Grandpa made him stand up. He said he kept wondering what would have happened if I hadn't saved him. My heart hardened completely. I would never undo my choice. I would never let my son relive that shame for the sake of my father's house or my brother's comfort. The bargaining stage was officially over. The family realized I would not cave, would not reverse the mortgage cancellation, would not restore their free safety net. Now their desperation would turn to rage, and the real fight was about to begin. With all bargaining attempts exhausted, my family dropped the victim act entirely and turned openly hostile. Dad stopped pretending to be hurt and started being furious. He posted public social media posts accusing me of abandoning family, of financial retaliation, of punishing him for minor parenting corrections. He told extended relatives I was a bitter, ungrateful daughter who hated her own blood. Mark joined in fully. He began spreading rumors that I was withholding money out of pure spite, that I was wealthy and greedy, that I wanted my father homeless and destitute. They painted me as the villain, while completely erasing the child abuse-adjacent humiliation that started everything. Several relatives who had previously stayed neutral finally picked sides. Half continued pressuring me to reconsider, while a small handful quietly told me they understood my position. They admitted Dad had always been harsh and prideful, always believed his family owed him unconditional sacrifice. The tension peaked when Dad showed up at my front door unannounced on a Saturday morning. I saw his truck pull up through the front window, and I immediately sent Jax to his room to play. I was not letting my son witness another confrontation. Dad stormed up the porch steps, banging loudly on my door. When I opened it, his face was red with rage. "You fix this mortgage today. You fix it now." I stood firm in the doorway, not letting him inside. "I can't fix it. The bank's final payment authorization is locked in place. The month's payment is the last one. Then you write a new check. You start paying again," he shouted. "This house is your family home. You owe this to me." "I owe you respect," I replied. "I do not owe you lifelong financial support while you humiliate my child." He sneered at me, cold and unforgiving. "That boy needed discipline. You're raising a soft, entitled kid who thinks the world owes him everything." I was teaching him gratitude. "Gratitude is not proving you deserve food," I said firmly. "Gratitude is being thankful for kindness. You gave cruelty. You received consequences." Dad ranted for several more minutes, yelling about how I was destroying his life, how I would regret this forever, how the whole family would hate me for this choice. He threatened to cut me out of inheritance, to remove me from family wills, to erase me entirely from his life. I listened without flinching. I had already accepted every consequence. I would rather be cut from inheritance and family legacy than let my son be shamed for sport. Finally, when he realized I would not budge, he stormed back to his truck, peeling out of my driveway aggressively. After he left, I sat down with Jax and had a gentle, honest talk. I told him Grandpa was upset because he had to take responsibility for his own bills, not because Jax did anything wrong. I reinforced that he was always worthy, always enough, never required to earn love or meals or a place at any table. Jax nodded slowly, hugging me tight. "I'm glad you stopped him, Mom. I didn't like having to prove myself." In that moment, I knew every bit of family backlash was worth it. My son's healing mattered more than fake family harmony. That night, the family group chat exploded with angry messages about me. They were no longer asking for compromise. They were declaring me the enemy of the family. The lines were permanently drawn. The final mortgage payment processed successfully at the start of the new month. From that day forward, my father was 100% financially responsible for his house. No more safety net, no more secret monthly support from me. Within days, the real consequences landed hard. Dad had never budgeted for the full mortgage amount. For 8 months, he'd grown used to my portion covering the bulk of the bill. He'd spent his extra money on leisure, upgrades, and gifts for Mark and Cole, never saving a single dollar for emergencies. Suddenly facing the full monthly cost crushed his budget. Late fee notices arrived immediately. Utility bills piled up. He could no longer afford his usual casual spending. The comfortable lifestyle he'd enjoyed entirely due to my silent sacrifice crumbled overnight. Instead of taking responsibility for his poor financial choices, he blamed me for every hardship. He texted me photos of late notices, angry paragraphs about how I'd ruined his life, how I'd left him struggling in his old age. Mark's household suffered ripple effects too. Dad could no longer afford to spoil Cole with expensive gifts, weekend outings, and cash handouts like before. Cole grew bitter and irritable, blaming me for cutting off his lifestyle perks. The family's internal unity began to crack. Mark started arguing with Dad constantly. He was angry that Dad's cruel Thanksgiving stunt had cost them all their free financial support. Dad snapped back, blaming Mark and Cole for not defending him better, for not convincing me to cave. For the first time ever, they were not united against me. They were fighting with each other. I watched it all from a distance, feeling no joy in their struggle, but no guilt either. I had spent 8 months quietly, faithfully supporting them. I had asked for nothing in return. All I'd wanted was basic kindness and dignity for my child. They refused to give even that. A few more neutral relatives reached out to me privately after seeing the chaos unfold. They admitted they'd initially thought I'd overreacted, but after watching Dad and Mark's behavior, they understood my boundary was necessary. They saw Dad was not a victim. He was a man who'd exploited his daughter's generosity and then threw a child under the bus to feed his ego. One elderly aunt told me plainly, "Your father has always loved control more than his kids. You finally took his control away." Her words settled deep in my heart. That was exactly what had happened. My money had given him power over me, power to judge, power to humiliate, power to demand obedience. Cutting the mortgage cut his power entirely. Still, they refused to accept accountability. Dad continued telling everyone I was cruel. Mark continued calling me selfish. Cole continued mocking Jax behind the scenes to family members. They were not learning kindness. They were only learning resentment. But that was no longer my problem. I focused entirely on rebuilding peace for Jax and me. We started new holiday traditions of our own. Small, calm, loving moments where my son never had to prove his worth, never had to earn his place, never had to endure judgment or laughter at his expense. I knew the family would not stop there. They were growing more desperate by the day, and desperate people always escalate their tactics. The final confrontation was still waiting on the horizon. As the mortgage crisis dragged on, my family shifted into full public smear mode to salvage their reputation. Unable to win on facts, they tried to win on public opinion. Dad began giving long, dramatic accounts of the situation to every neighbor, church member, and distant acquaintance he could find. He told people I was a spoiled, ungrateful adult who abandoned her father over a trivial family joke. He left out every cruel detail of Jax's public humiliation. He painted himself as a loving, misunderstood parent, victimized by his own daughter. Mark amplified the narrative online. He shared sob stories about their struggling household, about Dad's stress and sleepless nights, about how cruel family betrayal destroyed their peaceful life. He framed me as cold, unfeeling, and unforgiving. For a short time, it worked. Several community members sympathized with Dad. A few old family friends messaged me questioning why I would be so harsh. I waited patiently for the right moment to respond. I did not rush into drama or post angry replies. I simply compiled all my evidence. The Thanksgiving incident context. Dad's demand for Jax to justify his meals. Cole's mocking laughter. Months of my mortgage payment receipts. The family's endless guilt-tripping and threats. Once I had everything organized, I posted one calm, factual public statement. I explained exactly what happened at the Thanksgiving table. I shared that I had voluntarily covered the household mortgage for 8 months, with 0 complaints. I stated clearly that I ended support only after my minor child was publicly humiliated and forced to beg for dignity at a family holiday. I clarified that boundaries were not cruelty, and protecting a child was never an overreaction. I did not name names, did not attack, did not exaggerate. I only told the truth. The public tide shifted instantly. People who had previously sympathized with Dad began commenting support for my choice. Parents especially understood immediately. No loving parent would ever force a child to justify being fed, especially not for family entertainment. Neighbors who knew Dad's harsh personality privately messaged me, saying they were not surprised by his behavior. They said he had always been controlling and prideful, always demanded obedience from family. Dad was furious that his victim narrative had collapsed. He messaged me angrily, accusing me of embarrassing him publicly, of airing private family business, of humiliating him in front of the community. I replied simply, "You started the public narrative. I only corrected it with the truth." Mark's online posts lost all traction. His attempts to paint me as cruel fell flat once people understood the full context. Cole's attitude worsened. He began telling family members Jax was too sensitive, that I was raising a weak kid who could not handle harmless teasing. He refused to acknowledge how his laughter had amplified my son's shame. Through it all, Jax remained steady and calm. He saw the truth now. He knew his worth did not depend on family approval, and he did not need to prove himself to cruel relatives. The smear campaign backfired completely. My family lost public sympathy, lost community support, and lost their ability to paint me as the villain. With public opinion no longer on their side, their last remaining tactic was a final forced family meeting to pressure me into submission one last time. 2 weeks before Dad's house faced official late penalty foreclosure warnings, he demanded a mandatory family meeting. He texted me that every immediate family member would be present, that we would resolve this once and for all, and that I was required to attend. I hesitated at first. I knew it would be another room full of blame, manipulation, and zero accountability, but I also knew avoiding it would let them spin endless lies behind my back. I chose to go, prepared and grounded. I dropped Jax off with a trusted friend's house for the afternoon. I would never bring him back into that toxic environment again. I drove to Dad's house alone, calm and fully resolved. When I walked inside, Dad, Mark, and Cole were all waiting in the living room. The atmosphere was thick and hostile. No greetings, no pleasantries. Dad opened immediately with anger. "You will restart those mortgage payments today. This is your final chance to fix what you broke." I shook my head. "I will not restart them. I ended support because you humiliated my child. There is no going back to the old dynamic." Mark jumped in aggressively. "You're ruining Dad's entire life over a stupid kid's feelings. It was a joke. A harmless joke. Forcing a child to list reasons he deserves food is not a joke," I replied firmly. "Letting a teenage cousin laugh while a 10-year-old boy shames himself for your amusement is not harmless. That's emotional abuse." Cole rolled his eyes. "It wasn't abuse. He was just being dramatic." I turned directly to him. You laughed while my son fought back tears, trying to prove he was worthy of a Thanksgiving meal. You found his pain funny. You have never apologized, never felt remorse, and you still mock him for it. That is why the family lost its financial support. Dad slammed his hand on the table. I am the parent. I make the rules. You do not get to punish me for how I discipline children. You do not discipline kids by humiliating them for entertainment, I countered. You do not get to demand lifelong financial obedience while you hurt my child. I pulled out my payment records and laid them on the table. I listed every month I'd paid, every late fee I'd covered, every expense I'd quietly handled for 8 months. I reminded them I had never asked for thanks, never complained, never demanded anything in return. I only asked for kindness for my son. You took my money greedily, I said, but you refused basic human decency for my child. That deal was one-sided, and I ended it. Their arguments crumbled. They could not deny the payments. They could not deny the Thanksgiving incident. They could not deny Cole's laughter. All they had left was guilt and anger. Dad switched back to emotional manipulation. He talked about his old age, about working hard to raise me, about deserving loyalty and care. He begged, pleaded, and attempted to make me feel ungrateful. I did not waver. I will help you in genuine emergencies, I told him. But I will never resume permanent monthly mortgage support under your current treatment of my child. You cannot have my money while you shame my son. Mark grew desperate. What do you want then? What will make you come back? I want accountability, I said. I want you all to admit what you did was wrong. I want you to stop shaming Jax, stop mocking him, stop treating his dignity like a joke. Until that happens, the financial support stays permanently ended. They refused. Dad refused to apologize. Mark refused to admit fault. Cole refused to acknowledge his cruelty. They wanted the fix without the growth. They wanted the money without the respect. I gathered my papers and stood up. Then this conversation is over. I walked out of the house, leaving them defeated and furious. The final confrontation was over. They had chosen pride over peace, chosen entitlement over accountability, chosen cruelty over family unity. There would be no more negotiations, no more bargains, no more second chances. In the weeks following the final confrontation, the permanent consequences of their choices landed fully on Dad's household. Unable to cover the full mortgage on his retirement income, Dad missed his official payment deadline. Late penalties stacked up. His credit score dropped significantly. The bank issued official warning letters stating continued non-payment would lead to foreclosure proceedings within months. Panic fully settled into their home. Dad was forced to face the reality he had avoided for years. He could not afford his lifestyle without my free support. Mark tried desperately to fix the crisis, but he did not have the income to cover the massive mortgage payments. He was forced to pick up extra shifts, cut his own spending, and sacrifice his leisure lifestyle to help his father. Cole lost every luxury handout he had grown accustomed to. No more frequent shopping trips, no more gas money, no more random cash gifts from Grandpa. He was furious and constantly blamed me for his reduced lifestyle. For the first time in their lives, they experienced the weight of financial responsibility I had carried silently for 8 months. Many family members finally saw the truth clearly. They watched Dad spiral into stress instead of taking accountability. They watched Mark struggle with bills he never had to handle before. They watched Cole remain entitled and unremorseful. More relatives permanently shifted to my side, acknowledging my boundaries were completely justified. Dad tried one last desperate plea. He sent me a short, forced apology text. He said he was sorry I felt hurt at Thanksgiving, that he did not mean to upset me. It was hollow, generic, and centered entirely on my feelings, not on Jax's humiliation. I did not accept it. I did not reply. I knew it was only an apology to get the money back, not a genuine change of heart. That week, I sat down with Jax for a long, gentle conversation. I told him how proud I was of him for being brave and kind through everything. I told him he never had to prove his worth to anyone, that his existence alone made him worthy of love, food, family, and respect. Jax smiled softly and hugged me. I know, Mom. You already showed me that. His healing was complete. The shame from the Thanksgiving table was gone, replaced with quiet confidence and security. He knew his mom would always protect his dignity. Meanwhile, my family's life continued unraveling. Dad was forced to consider downsizing his home after decades of living there. Mark's financial stress created constant fighting in his household. Cole's entitlement turned into bitterness and resentment toward our entire family line. Their lives changed permanently because of their cruel choice on Thanksgiving Day. My life changed for the better. I was free of the endless financial obligation that had been draining me. I was free of walking on eggshells to keep cruel family members happy. I was free of sacrificing my peace and my child's dignity for fake family harmony. The old dynamic was dead forever. They could no longer take my generosity for granted. They could no longer shame my child without consequences. They could no longer weaponize family loyalty to exploit me. All that remained was the final chapter. Full healing, permanent boundaries, and a new peaceful life for my son and me. By Christmas time, our lives had settled into a calm, peaceful new normal. My family held their annual holiday gathering without us. They posted photos of their dinner table, full of forced smiles and empty harmony. None of them reached out to invite me or Jax. They still clung to their resentment, still refused to accept accountability, still believed I was the one who destroyed the family. I did not miss it for a single second. Jax and I created our own perfect Christmas. We decorated our small tree together, baked cookies, watched holiday movies, exchanged simple, loving gifts. There were no cruel demands, no public humiliation, no forced gratitude, no mocking laughter. There was only safety, warmth, and unconditional love. Watching my son laugh freely and happily, I knew I had made the best choice of my life. I reflected back on that terrible Thanksgiving day. My father had demanded my 10-year-old son stand and list 3 reasons he was worth feeding. He'd wanted my child to shrink, to beg, to prove his value for the family's amusement. But in stopping that moment, I taught my son a far greater lesson. Worth is never earned. Worth is inherent. You do not have to stand, perform, or justify your existence to anyone. You do not owe cruel people gratitude, obedience, or financial sacrifice. Dad eventually avoided foreclosure by downsizing his home. He sold the family house he'd clung to for decades, moving into a smaller, simpler apartment he could afford on his retirement income. It was a humbling, difficult adjustment he never would have made if my financial support had continued. Mark learned to budget responsibly for the first time in his adult life. He no longer relied on my hidden payments to cover family gaps. He grew more financially mature, though he still harbored resentment toward me for the consequences he faced. Cole never apologized. He still believes the whole conflict is my fault, still thinks Jax was too sensitive, still resents losing his free lifestyle perks. But he no longer has the power to shame my son, or get away with cruelty. Our family dynamic is permanently restructured. There is no more one-sided financial sacrifice from me. There is no more humiliating treatment of my child. There is no more fake harmony built on my exploitation. Occasionally, distant relatives reach out to check on Jax and me. They tell me privately that the family is quieter, less toxic, less entitled since the old dynamic broke. They admit the entire family benefited from my boundary, even if no one will say it publicly. I have no desire to rebuild the old relationship. I maintain polite, minimal contact with my father and brother when necessary, but I never again offer financial support. Never again subject my son to their cruelty. Never again prioritize fake family unity over my child's dignity. I lost the toxic family I once tried so hard to please, but I gained freedom, peace, and a healed, confident son. That Thanksgiving day, my family tried to teach my child that worth is conditional. Instead, I taught the entire family that kindness and respect are the only true conditions of family loyalty. Blood does not make family. Love, dignity, and mutual respect do, and I will never again let anyone forget that, for my sake and for my son's. This story is proof. When cruel family forces a child to prove their worth, setting firm boundaries is never cruel. Sometimes protecting your kid means burning the broken system down so they never have to doubt their value again.